Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for today, and in this one we'll be taking a look at a refresher of Munitions DPS Might in 2022. So similar to how the setup of the previous these refresher videos work, I will still have timestamps in the description and the comment section of the video. This is more to focus on the updated rotation, single target AoE melee, rather than going through like an entire spec, precision, everything else. This is just kind of focusing on the update in 2022 compared to max stats and the same stats as all the previous guides, so you can have a more easily direct comparison. So we'll be touching off on the melee rotation first. Now, one of the most key aspects to Munitions DPS, just in general, and why so many people are Munitions, besides how easy the damage is or referred to, but it's the flexibility. That's the core component of Munitions DPS. You have a lot of flexibility in rotations, and there's, depending on what situation you're doing, there's a Munitions power that's going to be suitable for it. So in terms of artifacts, we've got Transformation Strategist card. That's always going to be the 2 for melee. The third artifact can change depending on your situation. You can certainly swap into Linares Amulet and just go for like a pure buff might build. This one's going to put larger strain on the healer, so just be mindful of that. But technically that would be the highest damage if you wanted to run Trans-Strat Amulet and then swap in Eye of the Gemini. If you didn't want to swap in Eye of the Gemini, then just use Eye of Gemini as a permanent artifact. So then you've got Transformation Stratus and Eye of the Gemini. And then you've got the 2 superchargers. I don't run Robot Psychic on this because, I mean, half the time I find Robot Psychic dying anyway. So it's much more reliable to replace Robot Psychic with a supercharge, because then you can constantly have that Gemini spam in your groups, if you have that. If not, then you can always drop that and run Robot Psychic if you want. It kind of speaks to that flexibility. So in terms of the AoE ally setup, this is going to be the kind of standard DPS setup for now. We've got Superman, which is the highest AoE ally. We've got the Batman Who Laughs. Actually, that should be on the card proc. So while in combat, receive a random beneficial card. And then we've got Emperor Aquaman. So when your supercharge is used, the ally cooldown reduction for when you use Bloom and Neo Venom Boost, or Big Gun, or whatever supercharge you choose to use. And same thing, I don't really have to touch on the trinkets, but obviously you're going to have the DPS trinket, a pet trinket, orbital, and spot drop. So let's kind of show you how it's going to parse. Okay, so you get the idea of the rotation there. In content, you're consistently always going to be well over 2 mil. I mean, I only dropped below 2 mil basically twice in the terms of the parsers. Now, I know a lot of you don't like Dervish being used, but, you know, if you're not super speed, once again, you have that flexibility with munitions. I mean, you can always drop this and put in like railgun or mini nuke, whatever you want. You've got those options available to you. And at the same time, with running Eye of the Gemini, you're constantly proccing the stacking Eye of the Gemini on the other DPS as well. And then once again, you could either run like 225s, you could run Neovenom, you could run Pheromone Bloom, you could run Bloom and Speed Drain, whatever your options are. You have all that flexibility. So with regard to munitions single target, you're always going to have the same 3 abilities used: Amplified Heat Vision, Multi-Net Launcher, and Chain Gun. That's always going to be on your loadout, no matter what. If it's not, then you're going to be missing out on single target damage. But other than that, that's where the flexibility comes in. You can run small package, because technically, if you want to have some more extra damage in terms of after the 35%er, it's mixing in small package into this 3 rotation. Or you can also run Amulet. So if you want to take off Strategist card and run Amulet for a single target, then you have the ability to have that safety net rotation, so you can still use Heat Vision and Multi-Net, go into Chain Gun, and then eventually, once it builds up in terms of going to be taking damage, then you can go into small package and basically continue the rotation. So it provides that flexibility if you want to have a little bit relief on the healer, or you just take out small package altogether. If you're gonna run that amulet and go with like a full amulet build, you can take out small package and put like either Robot Psychic Gun on double supercharge for either Gemini. Mostly if you have the gem spam groups, you wanted to use Neovenom Boost and Big Gun as your supercharge option, so you have that flexibility again. I'm in combat, so it didn't change the loadout there. But if you want to just go with the standard rotation, artifact-wise, it's going to be Soul Amplifier, Strategist card, and Transformation, and then swapping in Gemini, or taking off like Strategist and putting on Gemini. It all depends on A, your comfortability with swapping artifacts, B, what the group is. If it's like a pure gem spam group, then yeah, you're going to need it. Another thing I want to note is I've seen some people use Mini Nuke on pure single target. That is not what you want to do. Because it's just a huge power loss. Like, you have the ability when it does crit, it could be 120k, but I've seen some people use it over like multi-net. So how multi-net works is just if you aren't as familiar with munitions, you've got the tap range, which does net retractor, and the hold range, which is multi-net retractor. So if I tap range, you saw I just did that second hit, and then say if I was on these targets, if I hold range, it's a multi-hit. So really, if there's like a single target boss fight with some adds that come out periodically, but mostly single target, multi-net's going to work for both abilities. But say if I just set up burning here, and I use Mini Nuke, you saw that the base damage, I'll do it a few times here and show in the log just so you can see it, but just where the burning PI applied. Not to mention the incredibly annoying animation. But say if we go to logs here, if you didn't already see it, so we've got the base damage is around 50k, and then it crits about 120k. But if I do the same situation with like multi-net, in that same time it takes to do mini nuke, plus not factoring in the actual animation time and power cost, but the base damage is 30k. You saw the crits for 80k if it does both, or to do both. Yeah. So the multi-net retractor hit for 80k, and then the actual mini multi-net hit for 80k. So I mean, it's 150k altogether. So just that one ability is actually more damage on a single target when you get the crits than mini nuke, and especially more. If you don't get the crit on mini nuke, then it's almost twice the damage just with the base damage. So that's why. Mini Nuke is flexible in terms of when you're using a boss fight with adds out like the entire time. Let's say like Darkside War Factory, then yeah, you could use that because it's going to be great for AoE. But if you're just single target plus maybe a few adds that come out, don't use Mini Nuke on single target. It's not required. So let's get into the parsing. Okay, so you guys saw the rotation there before I ran out of power there at the end. Pretty much the entire time you're going to be over a million, 1.1, depending on how the crits work out. You could be end up being at 1.2, and that's just base damage. I forgot to mention as well, in terms of the ally setup, the only thing that changes is that technically you should run House of Legends bot. You can run Crypto, but the problem is Crypto blinks towards the target, and considering range, Munitions is primarily range-based damage. If you're going to be using either Gemini circles, House of Legends bot will spawn in them, or Crypto could technically blink out of them, and then you lose the ally damage. So that's why if you're a range DPS, then definitely use House of Legends bot over Crypto. If you're melee or mid-range, you can still use Crypto because you're still getting the circles. But yeah, other than that, really, once again, it's just rotating these 3 powers. Once the target is below 35%, you can technically use small package, but you don't need to. You can drop small package for a second supercharge if you wanted to, same thing. I would make a note about Big Gun is that if you use Big Gun and get interrupted, you lose the supercharge. So just be super mindful of that. Not that you jump cancel it, but if you get interrupted, since it's a channel-based supercharge, you'll lose that supercharge. Before in the past, it was just that it reset the cooldown. So you kept your supercharge, but then you had to wait another 60 seconds to use Big Gun. Now you lose your supercharge. With I think they made that change when Suppressor came out. Why? I don't know, but it just does. So that be mindful of that with Big Gun. But that's still going to be your best option in terms of like when you're buffed in raids like Tetra, Cog, everything else buffed in raids, plus the supply drop and EUG damage. Big Gun is still going to be the way to go if you have that enough gem span in the groups. So for the range rotation, once again, you find yourself with some flexibility. Now, in terms of artifacts, similarly to, I should have mentioned it earlier in the guide when I talked about the melee rotation, but really, Munitions in terms of the third artifact, you could use any of these 3, depending on your situation, or if you want to swap, or if you care about maximizing the amount of damage, whatever. So it's always going to be transformation card, strategy card, but you could use Quizlet on range. That's perfectly viable. You could use either Gemini if you're going to be in a kind of a Gemini spam group to take advantage of Pollux Gate circles. You could run Amulet just to kind of maximize your might. But once again, there's a drawback to that depending on if the healers can support that. But I mean, that's always viable as well. I just swapped the right artifact. So really, in terms of a third artifact, it really depends on A, your preference, B, if you want artifact swap, and C, if you want to run necessarily that risk. I mean, Linear's Amulet is not going to be a situation where it works in all content. Munitions, because of the amount of channels that it has, it's very artifact swap friendly, just like fire. So that's why a lot of people go Munitions DPS, just because of the time, like chain gun, rail gun, heat vision. You have tons of opportunities to switch and swap artifacts on powers. So for the sake of this clip, we'll be using Quizlet for range, but like I said, you can swap any of these 2. The other thing that I should mention, once again, probably should mention at the beginning of the video, but most of you are probably already aware. When I talked about Grim versus Quizlet in terms of having power interactions, Munitions Chain Gun is one of those ones where you have to have the power interaction. If you are not burning enemies with Chain Gun or have burning setup for Chain Gun, you're losing massive, massive, massive damage. So that's why I always have Flat Cannon. Flat Cannon's a 1 second cooldown. It's actually really decent in terms of the damage wise too for the 1 second cooldown. That's why Munitions kind of DPS ran Grim in the past, just so they wouldn't have to run Flat Cannon, but you have to have burning for Chain Gun. And how this works is that basically you do Flat Cannon. The other requirement for this ranged one is accelerated mini nuke. So if you have accelerated mini nuke on, you can go Flat Cannon, Chain Gun, mini nuke, rails. Then you can skip Flat Gun because it's still going to be burning PI. Then you go back into Chain Gun, mini nuke, rails, and then refresh the burning PI with Flat Cannon. So you're using Flat Cannon every other time, but you have to have the accelerated mini nuke in your back for that to cooldown wise to line up. So let's jump down and show you the rotation. So you get the sense there. This is a rotation. I should mention as well with the allies, because you're using mini nuke. Mini nuke is the highest power cost move in the game at a 450 power cost. So anytime you use mini nuke, you really should be using cyborg, unless you have a good troll. I mean, that's up to you. If you feel like you're kind of draining on power, just swap in cyborg. But obviously, more damage you'll do in the long run is going to be without cyborg. It's going to be with Aquaman, just with a supercharge reduction on cooldown, on your ally cooldown. So you use your ally more often. So it's really at that point, once again, it's up to the flexibility and the preference of you. So in terms of the damage right there, I mean, you're pretty much consistently over 2 million, 2.2, drop to 1.75 there. And then I was running out of power at the end. So it's one of those situations where in a raid, it's not going to be an issue. I mean, in sparring target, I'm just relying on when they give me my power return. In a raid, you'll be okay with this. But as I said before, mini nuke, that power cost, 43k power cost every 6 seconds we're using it. It certainly adds up really quick. That's why cyborg is handy. So you have that flexibility. Cyborg's really cheap to level as an ally. You should have him anyway. And then once again, in terms of supercharge, it's really up to you. You can still use big gun. You can always drop robot psychic and run a second supercharge. You have that flexibility. Because robot psychic from range, it's not any kind of damage to write home about. And then you could swap in Quizlet and for either Gemini, etc. So kind of speaking to that flexibility.